If you think about it, automation itself just makes bad processes fail faster. You automate them, they fail even quicker. The biggest barrier to implementation and why organizations start to feel under the pump with employee fatigue and dissatisfaction, it's not technical, it's behavioral. Like employees have to trust the technology. Employees have to see the technology as an enabler, not as a threat. Think about AI as the intelligence multiplier, not as a replacement itself. The organizations that will win this century, that'll do really well compared to their competitors, will be the ones that actually understand intelligence and how that actually compounds itself.
Today's guest is Roger Chao, co-founder of Imitation Machines, a company pioneering robot learning through demonstration and reinforcement rather than traditional programming. Roger is here to tell us where robotics and AI automation are heading, what ethical and governance frameworks need to evolve, and how leaders can navigate the trust gap between humans and these increasingly adaptive machines. Let's get stuck into it. Roger, welcome to ROI from AI.
Thank you, and lovely to be with you this morning.
My pleasure as well. So, imitation machines, you're taking quite a different approach to automation because you're teaching robots through demonstration rather than code, as I said in the intro. So, why is this shift so important for robotics and their future?
Yeah, so I guess from our perspective, we've seen the entire robotics industry as a bit of a paradox. Like, there's fantastic machinery out there, there's fantastic hardware out there. They're able to dance, able to perform, play music and other things. I was actually in China for a robotics conference just about 2 weeks ago, and I saw robots there doing ballet, doing kung fu, doing backflips. Like, the level of hardware was amazing. But the one thing that was holding a lot of these robots back was not the hardware, but their minds, which was still quite primitive. They could act, but they couldn't adapt. And every new behavior had to be laboriously coded by roboticists, highly trained experts in that field, which really meant that the promise of robotics was largely inaccessible to the wider world. So we really founded Imitation Machines to change that. We wanted to democratize robotics from that perspective. So our aim was to free robotics from the tyranny of programming and make it as intuitive as teaching a human apprentice from that perspective.
I've been seeing all these videos online the past couple of weeks of robots trying to go upstairs and then they miss a step and they start freaking out. They can't recover. So, yeah, they're uncanny. They're becoming close to human, but it seems like there's still a lot of work there, which kind of leads me to my next question. It does feel like, especially with AI, but now robotics really taking shape, there is some hesitancy and some risk aversion from companies at large wanting to implement these technologies. What are these misconceptions that you're seeing? Is there this reticence or is adoption pretty encouraged?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. So on the side, I actually do a lot of consulting to various companies that are thinking of either adopting AI or have already adopted it but having some teething problems from that perspective. And I think the key thing that I always tell them is it's not always that trade-off between governance and oversight or innovation itself. Because a lot of times people think actually you'll hamper innovation if you have too strong a governance lens on this. But for me, I actually see oversight is not about control, it's about clarity. And I think good governance is actually an accelerator of innovation itself. A typical example I provide, because I also teach a lot of workshops on risk, for example. And I say to people, well, why do racing cars have brakes? And people say, oh, it's easy, I know the answer. It slows the cars down, that's why we've got brakes. And I say, well, actually, the reason why you have brakes on a racing car is so you can actually drive faster. If you didn't have brakes, you wouldn't actually be able to drive at the speed that the car would be capable of. The brakes provide those guardrails that allow you to drive faster than you could than if you didn't have brakes. And that's how I see oversight and governance with a lot of organizations actually achieving that from a risk domain when it comes to innovation. And first thing that I always tell a lot of people when they're thinking of adopting AI is actually, well, understand why you're doing this. Don't just adopt AI for the sake of AI because every other rival company or your neighbor is doing the same as well. Actually understand why you're trying to do it. Anchor every AI initiative in a real world business problem, in a social outcome, whatever that actually is. Actually understanding, well, what are we trying to achieve? What problem are we solving? What will this system be allowed to achieve or decide? And when must a human actually intervene? And I think if you start to answer some of those questions, you actually get a more responsible innovation policy itself than any 50-page policy, which just goes on and on and on. So that's probably the first thing as well. The other thing for me is actually trying to embed ethics into the organization when it's deciding and when it's implementing AI from that perspective as well. I think even if we look before the whole AI gamut actually took off, Some organizations already had existing ethics statements, but they sat on the shelf. They sat in the top drawer. They got written once and they never got looked at again. Um, and I think the key thing is to actually translate this into real world practice to give guidance to people on the ground. So, as opposed to just having an ethics policy or an ethics statement, actually creating it and embedding it as some kind of design checklist, for example, embedding it into your project gating. So, asking as you're going through those project stages, actually, have we tested for bias? Is the system actually explainable to a regulator or to a customer? Do we have a rollback plan if it starts to behave unpredictably from that perspective? So, really try and make these mandatory sign off gates within your system, as opposed to just a policy or statement sitting in the top shelf, I think really helps organizations create those guardrails and allows them to innovate faster, better, more efficiently than actually not having guardrails there from that perspective as well.
Yeah, and you touched on ethical AI and ethical robotics. I think it's something that a lot of companies might not really consider. I would think that bigger companies are wanting to implement AI and automations to really level up and go to that next stage, and maybe they're not really thinking about ethics. So, what is your definition of ethical AI and automations? And how do you see this line starting to blur over the next few years between human behavior and what is artificial?
Yeah, so for me, it's all about, I guess, working responsibly. So your stakeholders aren't just your hip pockets and your shareholders. It's also the broader society and looking at actually what are the implications for everyone involved, whether it's your suppliers, whether it's your customers, whether it's your employees, whether it's the environment, and adding that lens on top of just your pure fiduciary duty as well when you're making decisions and when you're governing from that perspective as well. And I think a good way to look at this is also applying that risk lens back onto it. Because I think if we start to understand ethics, we start to understand risk, what steps we need to be taking to mitigate some of these risks that might result in poor ethical outcomes as well. And I think the key thing that I always talk about is about visibility, about transparency, about trust, and about ownership. And for me, you can't govern, you can't monitor what you can't see. Um, if you don't have a live register of every single piece of automation or algorithm in use, if you don't understand the purpose, if you don't understand the owner, the training data source, or the risk ratings, you can't actually stay on top of what AI assets you actually have. So I think the first thing is really creating that AI or that automation inventory, which is in that single source of truth, whether it's for regulators, whether it's for internal audit or whatever is, because it makes sure you understand, you know the systems that you've got and who it affects as well. The other thing again is also about just ownership, about accountability. So whether you're deploying a new AI system, whether you're buying or procuring a new AI system, actually understand with a model fact sheet in terms of, well, who trained it? How was it trained? On what data? Under what assumptions? What are the fail safes there? So really treating algorithms almost as suppliers, subjecting algorithms to the same due diligence you would subject a new supplier to when you're taking on board their business. So a vendor can't explain how their AI model works, or don't put it into production because it's just going to be too risky. Because I think simplicity and explainability are not the enemies of sophistication when we're looking at AI. They're actually preconditions for trust with your employees, with your customers, with regulators as well. And I think lastly as well, again, transparency and communication. Like if something goes wrong, silence destroys trust much quicker than the failure itself. We've seen in the media recent events where things have gone pear-shaped, where AI has gone pear-shaped, where systems have gone pear-shaped. Um, Silence destroys that trust faster than anything else. So having pre-approved language, pre-approved statements, whether it's communications to regulators or customers or the wider sector itself, really demonstrates that you know what you're doing, that you've got confidence, and you're doing something about it. Because you really want to translate that reputational risk into credibility with all of your stakeholders as well. And I think that's how you embed ethics into what you're doing when it comes to AI in a business.
I think it's really smart. It's a smart approach because we so often just hear about the technology and the productivity increase and the time saving. We don't really hear about the day-to-day ethics of using AI. And you said it right there. With great power comes great responsibility. And it can be very tempting to see this carrot dangled in front of you and you really want to increase profits and it's all plus, plus, plus. But there is a lot of accountability at place when you have something that is so powerful. But I also believe we're learning to use AI alongside AI actually growing and evolving. So I think us as humans are getting better at utilizing this power. But one thing that we do often see from person to person is this like anti-AI sentiment and this like trust building that needs to take place. In your view, what do you think is the biggest governance challenge when humans are starting to trust machines and learning and adapting to these machines in real time.
Yeah, I think talking to a lot of organizations and doing a lot of consulting, it's not just the trust element, but it's also a lot of people are thinking, actually, what's it going to mean for my job? What's it going to mean for my livelihood? Am I going to be replaced as well? And how do the ethical considerations come into that as well? But again, as I always to say to a lot of organizations, if you're thinking about adopting AI, don't think of it as a cost reduction tool. Think of it as a strategic transformation piece as well. If you think about it, automation itself just makes bad processes fail faster. You automate them, they fail even quicker. Don't have a bad process that you then automate. I think the question that needs to be asked is not how does this save us money? How does it cut costs? Um, but what new capabilities could we build if our people were enabled and didn't have to undertake these repetitive tasks? So I think AI is not so much a replacement for human judgment. It's actually there to actually elevate human judgment from that perspective, which can actually put some people's minds at ease when they're discussing some of this as well. Because I think, again, when I talk to a lot of organizations, they say, oh, we're going to jump on the AI bandwagon. Everyone's doing it. We need to do it. But the thing is, actually, you don't start with AI and search for a business need or problem to solve it. You start from the other angle. You think, actually, what's my business need? What's the desired outcome? What model and data do I need around that? And if you can't tie it to that P&L impact or the customer experience, it's just not relevant as well. Um, Also related to that AI piece is also just around the implementation. Like as we know with AI adoption, and not just AI, but tech adoption, it's all about culture and less about the code. The biggest barrier to implementation and why organizations start to feel under the pump with employee fatigue and dissatisfaction, it's not technical, it's behavioral. Like employees have to trust the technology. Employees have to see the technology as an enabler, not as a threat. So it's that change management, that's change storytelling piece around understanding actually how will AI help me as an individual. It's not there to replace me. It's actually to help me undertake my task or my role even better as well. So I think that's the other ethical lens to apply to this when you're looking at how and why you actually adopt AI and what that means ethically across the company as well.
Yeah, that is so true. And I'm so glad that you said that because it's conceptual. I feel like AI is still very conceptual, where you say, I want to use AI to make money. It's like, what does that mean? I think it's like saying, I want to make art. Like, it's such a broad umbrella term. I think you start with identifying specifically what do you need help with? Do you need more tools? Do you need productivity? Do you need more time, more clients, whatever it may be? Then use AI more specifically, or else, like you said, you're going to just be running these automations that were already not working and just make them not work a lot faster. So I'm sure you've seen a lot having a foot in both worlds between business and technology. And with these businesses that you're working with, I'm sure they've got very established frameworks. How flexible do they need to be to start implementing AI, and how agile would they need to be looking ahead to make sure they're working alongside how technology is evolving so they're not getting left behind?
Yeah, so for me, I actually found that it's more of a cultural challenge than a structural challenge. So when I'm talking to a lot of businesses that are thinking of adopting AI technology, or even what we're doing at imitation machines more broadly, it's not that they have structural restrictions around what AI can provide or what robotics they can bring in. It's about actually understanding what's our appetite for it within the workplace. What's the culture actually like within the workplace, with our employees, with the unions, with our board from that perspective. So again, for me, it comes back down to that storytelling, that change piece. People don't like change imposed on them. They like being involved in the change process itself. The last thing someone wants to hear is, actually, we've got a robot who's replacing your job now. Goodbye. That's not going to fly. It's bringing them on board for the journey. And because if we think about it, if we think about what we're doing, for example, with imitation machines, we're giving the person who's the expert in that particular task the opportunity to train a robot. If you think about it traditionally, you'd have a team of very expensive engineers, highly qualified, highly skilled, highly trained engineers, coding up a robot for 6, 7, 8, 9 months, sometimes even more than that. And they're the robotics expert, they're the software expert, but they're not the expert in the task. Who's the best placed person to teach someone how to pick strawberries? Who's the best person to teach someone how to stack pallets? It's not the software engineer. It's the person who actually already does that task. So it's really a transformation of their role, I think, and actually understanding the culture around it where we're not replacing you. We're actually enhancing what you do to actually allow the business to work better from that perspective. So it's that storytelling, that change management, which really needs to come across to, I guess, change the appetite for bringing innovation, robotics into the sphere itself, as opposed to saying, we're here to automate your entire workforce and you won't need them anymore. That's not what this is about.
Yeah, and I think that's something really dehumanizing around, let's just make some money. We have to like save some time. We have to make profit, P&L, bottom line. As an employee, that can feel very dehumanizing. I've experienced that in the past and I've been made redundant because of AI before, but I'm still very pro AI. And you spoke about just then the negative impacts of implementing AI irresponsibly for employees and that impact on culture. What are some of the positive impacts that AI implementation and automation can have on culture that would improve employee morale?
Well, I think it also enhances, I guess, the value or the fulfillment of your work itself in undertaking other streams of work. And it also acknowledges you as an expert in that domain. So, traditionally, if we think about the people that were in charge or overseeing AI, it was the highly trained, highly skilled roboticists. People who've done years of study, years of training, and they were seen as the experts of AI. If we're thinking now about the, I guess, the innovation or revolution that something like imitation machines or imitation learning more broadly brings to the economy, it's actually understanding the experts aren't the people that can program well. The experts are the people that actually understand the task really well. Like the best person, again, going back to another analogy, the best person who knows how to fix a car, go under the hood, under the bonnet, turn different tools, is not someone who studied robotics and AI and can code the robot to do that. It's a person who's spent years, decades, understanding how a car works, who's been under the hood of the car, who's got greasy and dirty and spent years under the car. It translates them into the experts as well and really raises them up from that perspective. So, in terms of an equitable change across society, it really raises their capacity and it gives them more fulfillment because they're then seen as the expert as opposed to outsourcing it to a roboticist or an AI expert from that perspective.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. AI, I think, is something that's alongside us instead of omnipresent and above us. All praise AI, we'll use it, but I think it's our pal, it's our tool. So I really like what you're saying around how we view AI and how we implement that into our lives, where it's giving us the control and giving us the power, especially if you're an employee. So I think that's quite powerful. And since you're working with all these businesses, I'm sure you've seen some of the growth that they might have experienced in the past 3 to 5 years. AI has definitely skyrocketed the past 3 to 4 years. So if you had to look ahead, what do you think will be some of the more significant changes in this space, especially when it comes to businesses implementing AI and automations?
Yeah, for me, I think there's a next step because a lot of people think, okay, it's people and then it's robots. But there's actually many, many steps along the way, and it's a continuum. I think we're going to see a growth in cobots. So people working collaboratively with the robots. Because, like I said, AI and robots aren't a replacement for humans. They're to enhance the humans to be able to allow humans to do their job better and to allow humans to undertake not menial, repetitive tasks, but do the tasks that they're actually skilled to do and that they've got the knowledge and they've got the willpower to actually do as well. So I think working alongside robots is probably the more applicable next step in the future as well. Because there'll be tasks that still only humans can do in the near future. There'll be tasks where it may be too dangerous and only robots should be doing it in the future from an OH perspective. And then there'll be tasks where a human working with a robot is probably more efficient than just humans or just robots as well. So I think we're going to start to see a bit of a shift where humans start to work collaboratively with robots, not about replacing them or working in isolation from that perspective. So I think that's probably a key shift along on the way.
Yeah. So no robot apocalypse where it's humans versus machines. We'll be working together in utopia. I love it. Imitation machines, I'm sure, will be at the forefront of all this. I want to turn it back to your company, actually, Imitation Machines, and anything exciting that you're working on at the moment, anything you can reveal. Where do you see your own company evolving? What's going on there?
Yeah, so for us, we're still in that kind of deep tech development stage. And like I said, our key thing is really to democratize robotics and allow anyone, even if they haven't studied for 5 years to understand robotics, to actually be able to train a robot from that perspective or teach it more explicitly. And I think some of the key things that we're actually seeing is really with regards to the complexity of the tasks and how we can actually start to address this. Because I think what actually happens with a lot of people when they're starting to utilize robotics is they see it as a bit of a black box. They know something goes in and then they know about the behavior comes out. But they're thinking, well, they're scratching their heads, well, how does this behavior actually come out? We know what's gone in and something's come out, but we don't know what actually goes on sitting inside that mysterious black box from that perspective. So what we're trying to do is actually open that up so people actually have that visibility to understand actually what's actually going on in the brain. What are they thinking about? Um, and if we think about typical tasks, and there are people that have done this in academia, they'll demonstrate emotions, say 500 times, and then the robot learns it. But what you don't actually know is which of those 500 tasks are actually valuable. Could you have taught it in, say, 300 demonstrations, not 500? Because there are 200 that the robot already knew. Or are there demonstrations that you haven't already provided that it would be good for you to provide? So I think we're working on some things to actually open up that brain, open up that mind to give more visibility to the end user so they can actually understand the thinking that goes behind this so they can actually refine those behaviors better than just a typical black box. So there's some of the cool things that we're working on. Other things as well is also just on the speed of adaptability and generalization. So one of the things that we've been working on and then we've proven as a test case was, I'm not sure if you know what a busy board is, but often if you've got kids or you've had kids, you've got these boards where children pick up different shapes and slot them into different holes, pick up different pegs and slot them into different things. Um, Typically, and we've been working with a couple of universities on this to actually train a robot to actually pick up different shapes wherever they're located, put them into different holes, configure them, put the hand down. I think a lot of universities are saying it actually took us about 7 to 10 days to actually train the robot to do that. We did it with our methodology in less than 3 hours. So it's an order of magnitude reduced in terms of the time saving. And it's not just the time saving, however, it's just the skill set that's required. I don't need to be a programmer to demonstrate a task. So those are some things that we're working on. And part of that is also, like I said, the messaging, the storytelling. Like we've spoken to a lot of businesses. We've worked with a lot of businesses. We're doing pilots as well. The first hurdle is not, do you have a robot? Can you afford it? It's actually the culture piece. What's your appetite around some of this? What are you actually bringing to the ecosystem? So there's some of the core things that we're working on at the moment.
Yeah, and I love the transparency around what goes on inside a robot. I think that feeds into building trusts and reducing hesitancy around these technologies, which are here to stay. I think this is our future and we need to adopt and we need to understand and we need to collaborate. So I love the idea of cobots. I love the idea of transparency and I love the idea of culture. I think it's so important. In fact, I think you're the first person I've interviewed that has discussed company culture and how that intersects with AI. So I'm very excited for all the work you're doing at Imitation Machines. And I want to end with one question that I ask every single guest, and that is, Roger Chow, what is your biggest tip for a return on investment using AI?
Oh, that's a hard one. I could probably talk for an hour on this one, though. The biggest tip that
Oh,
I
we have
see,
time.
the biggest tip that I would say to anyone thinking of adopting AI or using it is that AI is not just a technology. It's an intelligence multiplier, as I keep saying. Like the greatest return from using AI does not come from replacing labor. It comes from teaching machines to amplify human skill. And that's what we're trying to do at Imitation Machines from that perspective. Like the organizations that will win this century, that'll do really well compared to their competitors, will be the ones that actually understand intelligence and how that actually compounds itself. It's about that value creation of humans working alongside AI, not being replaced with. And so that's probably the biggest tip that I'd give to anyone. Think about AI as the intelligence multiplier, not as a replacement itself. Don't measure AI by cost reduction. Measure it by capability creation. Like, how quickly can your systems adapt to change? How easily can your expertise be scaled? These are the proof of point concepts when it comes to AI, not in terms of how much does it save from a cost perspective as well.
Amazing. I think that's the best mindset to have. And I'm so glad that you spoke about this today. It was, yeah, inspiring and I think very disruptive. I think it's good to look at AI in a more human way. So congratulations on all your success at Imitation Machines. I can't wait to see it really evolve even further and appreciate you making the time for me today, Roger, on ROI from AI.
Lovely chatting to you today. Thank you.